All right, guys, welcome back. I'm here with Pete Psotny, managing broker owner of Colorado Home Sales Metro Brokers. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you, John. And it's Pete Psotny. So,
Oh,
hello.
that's a hard one.
I
Yeah,
know.
for this Taekwondo realtor, that's a tough one. But anyway, guys, we're going right into the contracts today. So let's go in. We're back at CTME contracts. You got your login password. Let's log in. So last time we did Peter here. So let's look for Peter. Peter Son.
Oh,
Oh, there you go. There you are. Okay, so we found you. So we had the definition signed. We had exclusive right to buy signed. Pete looked. In 10 minutes, we found the house. So let's write an offer for Pete. So here, what you do is when you're in this page, you just click create new contract for this client. So that's pretty easy. Click that button. So what are we looking for? We're looking for sale contracts right here. And we're looking for residential, the very first one. So click on that one for residential deals. Create selected contracts. There we go. Today's date. We already have his name on here. So, Peter, why don't you explain to us the difference between joint tenants, tenants in common, and etc.
so this is an important section of the contract that you want to have a conversation with your clients. If there's just one person buying it, I typically mark the other and put in severalty or in severalty. If you have a husband and wife and or multiple friends or business associates purchasing contracts, it's important to have that conversation with the difference between joint tenancy and tenants in common. So the best way I find that I can explain this is tenants in common is like a business relationship. There's a percentage owned by multiple parties, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's 50-50. Let's say I'm in a $100,000 transaction and I'm putting up $70,000 and John's going to put up $30,000 in that transaction, but John and I are not married. So it's usually a good idea for us to purchase this property in tenants in common, meaning we both own a portion of the home, and we can actually convey title to those portions of the home separately without us conveying title together. So think of tenants in common as like a business arrangement for the property. Joint tenancy is a little different. Joint tenancy would be as though my wife and I were purchasing a home. We both own this home 100%. If I was to pass away, the title of this home would automatically transfer to my wife without any type of probate type of situations. If John and I own property together and I happen to pass away and we held it in tenants in common, there would actually be a probate situation where my portion of title could either be purchased by John, transferred to John, and or transferred to my family. So it becomes a lot more complicated situation. Think of joint tenants as married couples. Everybody owns 100% of the home. Tenants in common, more like a business relationship where you have to piece the home off to multiple buyers for multiple percentages of ownership.
Perfect. And even married people could also end up doing tenants in common if there is second marriage or third marriage, or they have their separate assets separated. So if they want to keep that separateness, and they, if one of them pass away or something, and they want their own children to get that portion of the house, then they may choose to do tenants in common as well.
Correct. One of my associates mentioned right of survivorship, joint tenancy. Those two are associated together. So,
Okay, so let's go to 2.2, no assignability.
this
So,
is a big deal for us
mhm,
investors here,
mhm,
John.
mhm,
I'm actually, when you have investors from other states, they're still assigning a lot of contracts right before
mhm,
closing
mhm,
because the buyer is not the entity that'll be closing at the table.
mhm,
This also falls into play with wholesalers.
mhm.
So if you're seeing those cash offers with 30-day closes and assignability clauses and additional provisions,
Mhm.
you know that there's a good chance that your property might be wholesaled. You need to be cautious of that
Right.
when you're receiving contracts on the listing side. That's what I wanted to touch base on assignability.
So let's go down to additional provisions, which is towards the bottom, paragraph 30. So let's just go ahead and add this contract is assignable. How's that?
Correct. And some of your investors might be asking to do that because they haven't decided who all their partners were or what entity is going to take title to the property.
Perfect. All right, let's go to 2.3. Click here to enter seller's name, but typically I just go right into save time button at this. Let me go ahead and press that. So here we go. So what you do is actually I have my own listing I'm going to sell you today. Okay, so street number and street name. Okay, it's not $1 million listing, so unfortunately.
Oh.
And then you have to add the city. So this one is in Aurora. Okay, so either you could do it by CTME contracts. So I would say 95% of listing brokers will probably have it in here. But if you don't find it here, you could also search it through RE Colorado, search MLS by address. Or you could do, if you have the listing ID, which is numeric, typically 7-digit numeric, you could search it through here. Or other MLSs, you could try to see if you could find them. 99% of the time, you will find it here. If not, you may have to do an actual printout of the MLS and go from there the old-fashioned way. But anyway, so 90% of the time, this should give us the contract that we're looking for. So here we go. John Park is the listing broker. So that is, sometimes you have more than one. If you have, 2 listing brokers that used to sell or try to sell. So you want to make sure you find the right listing agent. So click the one, and then the screen appears. And then what do you want to copy over from the listing contract? So typically, I will do select all so that all this stuff will come over to my contract that I'm writing. How about you, Pete? Do you bring everything or do you uncheck some of these stuff?
Well, teaching with you, John, I get to learn new things. So I'm old-fashioned way. I take go through every field. I'm just kind of used to it that way. So this is.
I know. I'm the lazy broker. So I will import everything over, and then that would auto-populate all the legal, all the address, all the stuff that was already on the listing contract on CTME or MLS, and it will pretty much auto-fill stuff. It doesn't mean you have to use those. You could always change it, but at least it will give you the base for your contract. And nice thing is it gives, it pre-fills listing broker's information and usually seller's information as well. So there we go. We'll go back to the top. Sorry for moving around here. So let's back. So this is where the county goes, Arapahoe County. And this is what you call legal address. So you could use this legal, which is, who did this, guys? Who put this in?
So this legal is populated through our Realist program.
Right. So the person who put this in
at the county records office.
Right. Was this one actually
a good day or a bad day or?
Yeah. So this one is actually inputted by the listing broker. However, he got that info. He could have got it directly from county assessor's data. He could have done ONE search from the title company. He could have gotten it many different places. So it's your job as a buyer's agent to verify this, correct?
Correct. And that's why I actually coach my agents to go to Realist outside of the MLS to grab the legal description and copy it from that particular section. Now, we don't have to be boundary surveyors, okay? No one's expecting you to know exactly what section, township, and range is going to be. This will be insured by a title company, and the title company will be insuring the legal description and making sure that you're conveying the proper property through their title attorneys.
Okay. So.
One quick mention here, John, actually. So if you're buying and selling within the city, and if you could see the end of the legal description where it lands in lot and block, So it's important to kind of understand the difference between a lot and block legal description and something called meets and bounds.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see a lot and block legal description, your assumption that the title is going to get transferred fine is pretty okay, and a title company is going to ensure that that policy and that lot and block
Mm-hmm.
transfer. But
Mm-hmm.
if you see meets and bounds,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically take a 45-degree angle, go 150 feet,
Mm-hmm.
then go south southeast another 15 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
At that point in time, it's important that you get a surveyor involved in the
Mm-hmm.
transfer of the property, because that meets and bounds description may be off. You may be buying something different.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you'll see this in mountain properties, not in local city lots.
Mm-hmm.
So just something to keep in mind.
Right, especially if you're selling stuff in Estes Park or Winter Park or Breckenridge, Aspen. That'll be nice to sell something in Aspen. Have you ever sold in? I think I sold one in my career, but anyway, it's kind of nice.
Well, the storage shed for $2.5 million over there still needs a boundary survey. And
Okay.
let me remind you that there is a transfer tax in Aspen, so we'll do
Mm.
that in section 15.
Okay, so let's go. Just make sure everything. I just did a deal. I'm actually under contract on a deal where a listing agent actually put the wrong zip code here. So we had to do an amendment to the contract to change the last digit of the zip code because they put the wrong zip code. So make sure your address looks good. Make sure you verify on Google Map and make sure they're good. All right, let's go. The first thing here is 2.5, which is inclusions. So can you help us with this section?
Sure, inclusions is an extremely important section. We'll start at the beginning of inclusions and the ultimate argument that you have on how many garage remote controls are at the property. So usually a two-car garage, I'm asking for two remote controls.
Mm-hmm.
This automatically populated because John had placed that he has a two-car garage into his MLS listing, so it'll automatically populate from there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the bigger things here is solar panels, water softeners, security
Mm-hmm.
systems,
Mm-hmm.
satellite systems
Mm-hmm.
that might be included in the property.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me mind you that a lot of these systems will also come with service agreements
Mm-hmm.
and leases and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So that's why they're outlined right away in section
Mm-hmm.
2.5.1.
Mm-hmm.
If you do have one of these boxes checked, you will likely want to follow up with some due diligence language asking for a copy of those types of agreements. And we'll get into that when we discuss our due diligence deadline documents.
Mm-hmm.
Solar panels mainly being the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going a little bit further down, 2.5.2, inclusions that are not attached. We're covering window treatments, storm doors, awnings, blinds. One of the things I coach my sellers is, if you don't want it conveyed, if you don't want your shelves or your family chandelier conveyed with the property, take it down before
Prior
you
to
list the
listing.
property, so that
Yes.
we're not negotiating the family chandelier, who in your eyes is worth $50,000 and your buyer's eyes is worth $100 in this particular sections on inclusions and exclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 2.5.3, personal property conveyed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is personal property that's being conveyed that has liens and encumbrances against them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I like to
so
put except none here.
Yeah, I usually put none. This is not where you write refrigerator, stove,
Mm-hmm.
oven, range, dishwasher, unless of course for some reason you have it on a line of credit, and that line would for some reason come and take the property if you didn't pay for it. I think the only thing that I can think of that I've ever put in here, John, and
Mm-hmm.
if you want to fill this in,
Mm-hmm.
is we have conveyed some larger properties that have tractors and large heavy equipment that might still have a loan against that equipment. So they may need to absorb that lien or encumbrance against that heavy equipment. Any experiences there, John?
No, no, or existing loan or something like that.
And then 2.5.4
Mm-hmm.
is something that you want to be really careful with. Depending on the property, if I am conveying the $2 million property in Washington Park, I will actually set a separate showing without my client and go back into the property with my phone and catalog the inclusions. And in those higher end properties, when I'm conveying a $25,000 stove, I will actually say Wolf Stove. Typically really easy to grab a serial number off of one of those. They're usually really easy to find. And I will get that detailed when I'm in the higher price points. Now, if I'm conveying your typical $400,000 house, I'm not necessarily looking for the serial number of every single Whirlpool or Kenwood appliance in there. But if they are stainless steel, I do think it's important that you reference the stainless steel kitchen refrigerator, white or black appliances. You want to be as specific as you can. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot of sellers try to take right now is the Ring doorbell or the Nest thermostat, where you walk the property and you haven't included the Nest thermostat. They haven't excluded the Nest thermostat, but when your client comes in after their closing, it's no longer there and it's been replaced with a $30 thermostat from Home Depot. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing that we have to be cognizant of. So do try to be very thorough when you're including your inclusions. And if you think it's questionable, like, oh gosh, you know that bookshelf over there, John, does it look like it's attached? If it's questionable, put it in here.
Great. Those are good stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to put, for you, refrigerator. I'm just going to do kitchen and stainless steel. I say new and stainless. All right. And washer and dryer, or let's actually exclude those two just for our sake, just for fun. So let's go here, 2.5.5. Or, oh, I'm sorry, there's a box here. If the box is checked, there's a separate agreement for personal property.
Again, when you get into higher end properties, estates, farms, I've conveyed several hundreds of thousands of dollars of personal property with those transactions, and those usually require a separate bill of sale.
Yes, so we need to have the bill of sale filled out by the seller and the buyer in agreement. So that will go into play, but for this one, we'll remove it because typically that won't happen. How about here, 2.5.5, parking and storage facilities.
You know, really the only thing here that I have, I mean, outside of the obvious, the 2-car garage or anything like that, but is outbuildings.
Yeah, storage shed.
Yeah, if there's a tough shed in the back, this is where you want to put that in there. They are easily removable with a crane. So, you know, if your client sees 3 large sheds in the back, you want to make sure that you've included those 3 large sheds in the back in section 2.5.5.
Okay, so let's jump onto exclusions. So I said the seller is taking washer and dryer. How about other stuff? Seller's personal property?
Tenant's personal property. And usually a listing agent's going to do a pretty good job of defining this in the ad. And I personally, 95% of the time, cut and paste from the MLS listing.
Right. How about wife? No, just kidding. I had to throw that in there. It was getting too boring. Okay. All right. Water rights, well rights. Yeah. Typically NA for most of our properties that we deal with. I'm doing one right now with well rights, with well permit. But do you want to cover this section a little bit?
Sure, John. I wouldn't mind. I lived out in Bailey for a while, and I probably convey about 5 or 6 properties down the 285 corridor. And obviously, we run into wells quite often. So a couple things to understand with a well. A well permit number is going to be issued by the Colorado Division of Water Resources. Whenever you have a well, you should cross-reference any information with the Colorado Division of Water Resources, and mainly call John and I. But one of the things that you need to know is the well permit number is about 6 digits long.
Yes.
If that 6 digits has a dash and a letter after it, there's actually water rights that are associated with that permit number. And when you have water rights, it's very important that you stop right there and call an attorney.
Yes.
Including myself will call an attorney every single time. And that attorney will then talk about how you need to deed the water rights over, which is usually done with a quick claim deed. And that's in section 2.7.1. So
Right.
if you see that dash in a letter, you should automatically think attorney. Okay? If that well permit number is only 6 digits long, then you know that you don't have any water rights, but you have a permit to pull a certain amount of water from a certain type of aquifer. And that could be a number of different things. It could be a household use. It could be a domestic use. It could even be a commercial or agricultural use. All of those have very different types of well permits. And it's very important that you can contact John and I when you're working with the well, because the use of the water may not be what your client is looking for. Not every property in the mountains has the ability to give water to your livestock, those types of things. So very, very important that you then seek some additional information. And before I give you a whole lot of stuff that can get you into trouble, those are the only 2 things that I really want you to know. If there's a dash in a letter, you need an attorney.
Right here. So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dash a letter B,
then or dash A, F, or any of those automatically should reference you to the fact that you need to talk to your client, that you have some water rights, and you need to get an attorney involved. They're not that expensive. They're only about $350 to convey the water rights and do the water rights research. Because just because that's in there doesn't mean that you're going to get water rights either.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So
water stock certificates, have you run into that at all, John?
No, not really. No.
I haven't either. So again, an attorney, if that comes to play, the listing agent will usually let you know that there's some kind of stock certificate associated.
But 95% of our deals probably don't have well involved in our market. So you guys should be okay. But when you do see water rights, well rights, yeah, talk to Pete. My associates talk to Pete. Okay.
John, I'm sure you've got plenty of practice there too.
Okay. All right, let's go to the dates and deadlines. Exciting. Okay. Oh my.
The most important part of the contract here, John.
Okay, let's see. I like to do this. I don't know if you agree. How about 2 plus MEC on the first one?
So, John, I guess we're just going to do MEC all the way through, right?
No, just the first one. Well, we could do MEC. I guess we could do MEC all the way through.
That way they know like the timeline, I think.
Okay.
So we could do a range of what we do.
Sure.
So I usually use 3 days personally.
Okay.
So I think 2 to 3 days.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to record title deadline.
We're not going to cover what any of these things are until
we will. Yeah, because we're going to go to those paragraphs later. So this is just to cover the dates.
So I'm doing 7 to 10 days. John, what are you doing?
I do about 7. So let's do 7.
7 and then 10.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm objecting at 10.
Okay. Now, if you're doing your actual contract, you could actually click here and find the date. So you click on that calendar icon, it will give you that. So 7 days from now, you could just go, how about next, you could put in the date, you could eliminate this. But for the sake of this class, we're just going to do just the MEC so that you guys can learn timeline. Okay, next one.
So
off record
matters again. I'm doing 7 on presenting, 10 days on objection.
Okay. So.
And one important thing here, John, if you could just open up one of the calendars for me again.
Sure.
So this is just kind of general timelines that we want you to fall into play. When you're a very busy broker and you have 10 or 15 deals at any given time, This is where you plan your days on
Mm-hmm.
how you're going to manage your transactions.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that if my objection deadlines are on a Monday, it's usually a really, really bad idea
Mm-hmm.
because you're trying to get a plumber or another roofer to call you back or
Mm-hmm.
something along those lines. So try to be cognizant of the way that you write your contracts and then write all of them the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that on a Tuesday are going to
Mm-hmm.
be all of my objection deadlines.
Got you.
And then all of my resolution deadlines are either going to fall on a Thursday or a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And I write every single one of my contracts the same because when I'm managing multiple buyers,
Mm-hmm.
I know that I don't have to throw objections out on a Monday and
Mm-hmm.
I can schedule a lot of appointments into my days. I
Mm-hmm.
know that every Tuesday morning, I better be sitting behind my computer because I likely have 3 or 4 different objections that I have to get out as a buyer's agent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that by Friday, I'm going to have to be resolving those. So I have to go through all of my resolutions by that Thursday or Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you're stacking your contract accordingly. When you have 1 or 2 buyers, it's not going to impact you as much. When you have
Mm-hmm.
15 at any given time, now structuring those dates in contracts and being consistent with them is going to help you be a better agent.
Great tip. Great tip. All right. I like that. So let's go to title resolution. So maybe 12 days.
14, 12 to 14, somewhere in there.
All right. Let's do 14 for this one. Okay. All right. Usually this is NA.
NA.
We'll talk about it when we get there. All right. Association documents deadline. How many days?
7.
7 days. Okay.
And I usually want to give my clients some time to read those, John,
Mm-hmm. So
because they are a very convenient read of 190 pages long.
Yeah.
So
Very
I
long.
usually give them 14 days to object
Okay.
or terminate.
All right. How about seller's property disclosure? 2 days.
2 to 3 days.
Let's just do 2. Okay. Lead base
Same.
2. Now this only applies if your house that you're buying is older than 1979,
8.
78. So from 79, you don't need to do it, I should say. So it's 78 or prior that you will need to do lead-based paint disclosure. We'll go over that when we get to that section again. How about new loan application?
2 days.
2 days. Usually mine is done,
Complete.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and it's not a bad idea. You can put completed in there so that they know that they've already had a TBD or to be determined type of loan.
Yeah, so they have already been pre-approved. Complete. Okay. All right. How about here?
I'm doing 27 days, John.
Okay. Okay. And again, this section is probably NA because this is an assumption. You're assuming your seller's loan or the buyer is assuming the seller's loan.
And we can cover that when we get to the sections, John.
Yeah, we're going to go there. Appraisal deadline.
So I'm doing that 25 days.
Okay.
You can do it as fast as 20, but our appraisers are getting a little more backed up.
Right.
Objection resolution the day after.
Yeah. You want to do same day or?
I usually do the same day because my loan termination deadline is 27 days. So.
Okay. How about ILC?
ILCs are going to take some time. Again, if you get into the meets and bounds, you will likely actually have to completely extend your contract. You're probably looking more into a 45-day contract because surveyors are not going to get out there faster than 3 weeks. So you're looking at 3 to 4 weeks, and we would be writing a little bit of a different contract if we were in a survey situation. John, that's my opinion. What do you think?
I agree with you. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so I'm just going to make a note for our people taking this class.
Meaning you have to adjust your period of your contract accordingly. So know that it's going to take you 3 to 4 weeks. You could put MEC plus 21 days there, but reach out to your surveyors and see how backed up they are.
Okay. So for this intent and purposes, we're gonna go back to NA because most of their deals probably will be NA. What do you think?
I agree.
Okay. All right. Inspection objection.
Anywhere between 7 and 10 days.
So let's go with 8 days. Okay. Termination.
Again, 10 to 14 days, depending on how tight your inspection objection deadline is.
So I'll take the middle. Okay. Resolution.
And I do the resolution on the same day as the termination day.
Okay. All right. How about property insurance termination?
Same day. I don't like to scatter my objections, again, for the purpose of organizing my clients.
So you will do
12.
8 days or 12?
Yeah, I usually do it at the
Okay.
termination resolution.
All right. Due diligence documents.
So this, again, I'm at 7 days for delivery, and I usually do 14 days for objection and resolution.
Okay.
I don't find myself really objecting a whole lot in the due diligence documents. I'm just really looking for supporting documentation for things like solar leases and permits pulled and warranties and things like that.
Okay, so conditional sale deadline. So what do you do here if you have a house to sell?
Well, ultimately, I would probably put in the closing date of the subject property or of the conditional property. So if that property is closing in 2 weeks, I might give myself a day or two buffer there on the conditional sale to make sure that you're not in a position of, let's say the house closes in escrow and won't be funding for a day, but your conditional deadline is the same exact day as that house was supposed to close. So give yourself a couple of days there, in my opinion,
Okay.
2 or 3 days after the conditional sale contract.
Or if you don't have a house to sell, then put NA.
Correct.
Okay, lead-based paint termination deadline. So
Again, lining up with my termination on inspection.
okay, so 12 days. Okay, closing date.
I'd say most of us is 30 days.
Okay.
Again, there may be some exceptions to this.
Right. And then depending on loan types too, right? You want to talk about that a little bit or should we wait? We should wait. We'll wait till.
There's a lending section, I think.
Yeah, let's wait. Possession, all depends, but maybe we'll keep it the same day.
I usually put a delivery of deed and funding here.
Okay.
Unless there's some kind of post-occupancy.
Or sometimes I put after closing and funding. Whatever works, I guess.
And under time, I usually copy the same.
Okay, so.
You could define a time.
Yeah. Delivery of deed. Okay. All right. So we're going to give the seller till tomorrow, Sunday, Monday.
Again, it depends on if you want to work on Sundays. You can put a Sunday deadline in there. Although John practices checking the will extend box.
Yeah.
So if you do have an intention of your contract getting accepted on a Sunday,
yeah, I do that.
Probably mark will not later on in the contract, because if you mark will, then you're not really getting that acceptance timeline. It'll automatically default into the following day. And I'm a kind of a stickler on the timelines as well. I do think that you should follow them, although there's many people that say that if a counter is executed, that the intent goes forward. So you don't have to keep changing the timeline over and over again, but I do put that in there as well.
Okay, so I'm just going to leave it there for now. Okay, so we'll just do
Saturday or Monday.
Yeah, we'll just do Monday for now. Time, it really depends. I'm just going to put 5 p.m. for now. All right, we're done. Yay.
All right, dates and deadlines. Now I guess we get the meat of the contract here.
Yes. Okay, so, you want to talk about different things here?
I mean, section 3.2 applicability of terms. This basically says that if there's no dates and deadlines in that section, then that section shall not apply.
Right. NA. Okay.
So if you put in a no inspection objection date
Mm-hmm.
into the contract,
Mm-hmm.
then you and your clients are not going to be objecting to an inspection.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've done that in error,
Then
you
you
may
can.
be paying for some of those items out of your commission check.
Yes. Or if seller's nice enough, they'll do an amendment to the contract and put in the date for them.
Yes, correct. The important thing is make sure you double check section 3. That's why when we started that, I said this is the most important section of the contract, as the fact that if none or NA is present in one of those boxes, it will automatically remove that
Yes.
section from the contract.
Correct. Yes. Perfect. Let's go to paragraph 4, purchase price and terms.
So the first box is pretty explanatory. You just submit your price.
Okay.
So we're offering $1 million, right?
Right. They're
Now
asking
we're buying
for
your house.
469,000, but you're going to offer $1 million. I like that.
Okay. We're being really aggressive in this market, John.
Okay.
We're low on inventory.
All right. Typically, you'll probably see $10,000.
10,000 to 100,000 on $1 million, yes.
You're not getting a loan, full
I'm
cash.
probably not buying at FHA, John.
Okay,
But for the purpose of the paragraphs, I think we should at least borrow 800,000.
Yes, yes. Assumption, this is where if you're doing owner carry or if you're taking over the seller's loan here, but typically you won't see that in this market.
No, but 5-6 years from now, when all these notes have been originated at 3%, we might be seeing assumptions a little bit later on down the road.
Right. So you have to look at the seller's note to see if it's assumable or non-assumable loan, depending on there. So, but I think
under private financing is the appropriate place to put a hard money loan, not representing yourself as a complete cash buyer.
Right.
Many people tend to do because a hard money loan is private financing. And then, as John mentioned, seller financing is the seller carry. Meaning that the seller is going to carry back a loan on the property after the sale.
So if they own the house free and clear, which actually this seller of mine actually owned this house free and clear, they may decide to work out a loan for you. So
he's probably going to have to carry the $530,000 that we're short on the appraisal.
Done. 0% interest. All right. So 4.2 seller concession. What is this?
So this is seller paid closing costs, any type of concessions that we're going to be asking from the seller. Back when I started real estate in 2008, this was an automatic 3%. However, in the current market conditions, you're very unlikely to represent that your seller needs any type of closing costs or concessions. Now, if you're representing, let's say, a VA borrower, who wants to purchase his home with $100 or $1,000, I think they have to have, then you would need to have some type of concession when you're writing this contract.
Right.
So different types of loans may require some form of concession. Just know that you want to make your buyer strong. So most of the time I'm seeing this as 0.
Yes. All right. So let's go to 4.3, earnest money. This one to be held by equity title. So who
majority of the time a title company,
majority of the time,
or a realtor.
Yes.
Never should you put the seller's name in there.
No, never should you. I would say 98% of the time it's a title company. But what do you do if it's like one of the companies? I mean, instead of title company, it's actually real estate company.
So I don't mind giving it to Remax or 8Z or one of the larger players out there that I know hold earnest money regularly. But and I run into this sometimes, John, with my off-market deals. So I'm representing an unrepresented buyer who has not picked a title company.
Mm-hmm.
or sorry, an unrepresented seller who's not picked the title company, nor do
Mm-hmm.
they have representation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my firm is set up to the point where we can hold the earnest money as well.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be held in a separate trust account,
Right.
a deposits account,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to definitely talk to your managing broker to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
they're comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more comfortable holding it as a third party on my buyer's side than to give it to a random for sale by owner and
Mm-hmm.
or a title company I'm not familiar with.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Okay, I think that's good enough for that. Let's go to 4.3.1. We that is when deadline. Usually, we used to deliver earnest money check along with our contract. I would say 99% of that is not happening nowadays. So we use this for MEC, like after buyer and seller agrees and signs a contract, then we will deliver the earnest money in 2 days or 3 days, depending on what we put right up here, which on this one we said 3 days. So let's say seller and buyer, they agreed today. So before the 3 days up, we have to deliver the earnest money. And who does that for us?
But typically, I'm either going to do it, an assistant and or a buyer can do it as well. But the 3 days is 3 days. If you do not have that in by that third day and you got stuck in traffic and missed the title company, you know what? At the end of the day, this contract terminates.
Mm-hmm.
And you are out of contract until that earnest money is then put back into play. And you should probably even amend your contract date as
Right.
such.
So yeah, we have a new thing that once the deadline is terminated, instead of doing it all over again, now there's a way to save that contract by,
Oh, that's right. The
yes,
contract revitalization form.
yes. So you could use that form to bring life back to the contract. Okay, so
We need that.
I think we're okay there. So let's go to does or does not. A lot of the realtors actually, or brokers, they forget to check this box. But what is this box, Pete?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's an easy one to flutter right over, and I do see it not checked in many cases. So in this case, you're actually representing whether your client has the funds available to go to a closing and that
Mm-hmm,
those funds are verifiable.
mm-hmm,
Um, a lot of times I will get, well, I'll have that money as soon as Uncle Jim sells his house, or as
mm-hmm,
soon as I get a loan from grandma, or selling my primary residence. Just because you have $500,000 of equity in your primary home doesn't mean you have $500,000 in cash.
mm-hmm,
And it's argumentably also said that if you haven't liquidated your securities yet, that you do not have funds immediately available.
mm-hmm,
But that is up to question because securities are a lot more
mm-hmm,
liquid than a non-liquid asset. And that's usually where I run into this issue,
mm-hmm,
where they don't have it because an asset needs to be liquidated in order for them to have it.
mm-hmm. So make sure you fill this out.
And it's
Okay.
probably a good idea to know if your client has the money to close to
Yeah.
closing or not as
Yeah.
well.
Talk to your lender, yeah, make sure they have the money. Okay, so here, if you're buying it cash, we could delete all this. That's how you delete a section of the contract, by clicking this box on. But for this case, we're going to leave it in the contract, so we're not going to delete this section. So we'll leave that not checked, and then we'll go to what? Are you getting a conventional loan for this house?
FHA, 3.5% down on my $1,000,000, right?
Okay, FHA, which stuff
I'm
usually
just
is
kidding.
not
That
going to.
doesn't exist, people.
Okay,
The loan limits on FHA
okay.
are just around $500,000. So just be cognizant of
This
that.
Yeah, this section should be pretty self-explanatory depending on which loan your buyer is getting. So we'll leave it that. Assumption, we're usually not going to see much for now, but so this is how you delete this out. So when you mark that box, this whole section here is no longer shown to your buyer.
With the respect to time, John, if anyone is doing an assumption, it's very important that you reach out to us immediately. It's far more complicated than you may think, and the loans may or may not be assumable. So please talk to us if you're going to
Yes.
assume something.
Same thing with the next section. Sellers or private financing, we recommend you guys to not do this at all. But if you do have to come to that time, talk to Pete or me so that we could talk to you about that. But it should always be not part of the contract. All right, so let's go to financial conditions and obligations. Can you explain this a little bit?
So this is typically your final out to the contract as well. So the new loan application, you have to have that application filled out within 2 days of the contract period. You have a right to review that loan and to understand all of those loan conditions. The out that we put into the contract is MEC plus 27 days. That's the new loan termination deadline. This is a very strong section of the contract, and it's in many times used to terminate at the very end of the deal if for some reason your buyer could not obtain financing, or in the sentence just below where you highlighted new loan termination, it says that if the new loan is not satisfactory to buyer in buyer's sole subjective discretion, meaning if you as the buyer expected a 4% interest rate and your lender decided to give you only a 5% interest rate, you do have a right to terminate this contract on the new loan termination deadline.
And get your earnest money back.
And get your earnest money back. Now, what I want you to understand that this is not a free-for-all final out to your contract. This is not to be used because your buyer decided that they're going to buy another property. This should be used solely in the event that your buyer doesn't qualify and or your buyer's terms become under their sole discretion unacceptable to that buyer. That's what this out is used for. It is not your final wave your white flag and get out of this contract type of out. You should truly be using it for the loan.
Okay. Next section, usually you will delete this out, so mark that section because this applies to people who are doing seller financing or owner carry and things like that. All right, so let's go. Section 6, appraisal.
So basically anybody getting a loan is going to need an appraisal. The important thing here to note is that the appraisal must be done by the appraisal deadline. And if the property did not appraise, you need to make sure that you have produced an appraisal objection by the appraisal objection deadline.
Yes.
There is only one exception to this rule, actually two, and that is if you're doing an FHA or a VA loan. So an FHA loan will also make you sign a FHA amendatory clause, which basically states that if a property does not appraise at the purchase price, this buyer has a right to terminate this contract and get their earnest money back. That is the only other provision that's notwithstanding the appraisal objection and resolution deadlines. Any other type of financing, conventional, seller, private financing, you do need to make sure that you're within your appraisal deadline, your appraisal objection deadline. If you have an FHA loan, it's also important that you reference section 6.2.2 and you put the purchase contract in that little box right there.
So we'll just do $1 million here. Okay.
I think the amendatory clause is going to fall into play here.
Yeah. Okay.
VA has the same rights as FHA. So if a property does not appraise on a VA deal and it's past your appraisal objection and resolution deadline, that does not matter for VA and FHA loans because you're going to sign an amendatory clause that allows them to do such.
Okay.
6.4 determines who's going to pay for the appraisal, whether it's the buyer or the seller.
What do you see most?
If you want your contract signed by a seller, you should probably mark the box buyer.
Okay.
Very rarely will you see a seller paying for an appraisal.
99% of the time. So we have about 10 minutes to go, Pete. So I think I don't think we could cover everything, but we'll still go
No,
on,
but
I
I think we
guess.
can get through section 7. I got some things to touch on here.
Okay. All right, let's go to
So
section 7.
homeowners association,
Mm-hmm.
this is very important, i.e. important enough to be in all bold caps letters.
See
So,
right here, all bold. Yep.
and one of the most important things to understand here is that an HOA will have covenants in a community that you have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And those are rules that will encumber that property, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to paint your house purple and the rules do not allow you to do that, you should
Mm-hmm.
probably not live in that community.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
If you choose to do so, then that community can fine you
Mm-hmm.
and can ultimately even go to the extent of foreclosing or taking possession of your home.
Yes.
And I know that because I've represented some HOAs where we've done that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, very strong paragraph. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my example of painting the house purple is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but more commonly do we see pet violations, the age restriction violations.
Mm-hmm.
Another big one for all you investors is a lot of these condominium complexes are now enacting bylaws limiting rentals in the communities. So if you're buying it as an investment property and then you put a tenant in there,
Mm-hmm.
then you will be fined very heavily to the point where you will not want to have a tenant and you'll be forced to sell the home.
Mm-hmm.
So covenants are extremely, extremely important
Mm-hmm.
to the rules of the home and can even impact the value of a home depending on how an HOA is being ran, managed, and
Mm-hmm.
so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my favorite one is voluntary HOAs, John.
Okay, let's cover
Does that
that.
mean that I can voluntarily decide to follow the rules?
No, there's no voluntary about that.
Exactly. So a voluntary HOA is simply the fact that you can volunteer to pay for it or not. It does not mean that the rules and covenants don't encumber the property.
Mm-hmm.
It does not mean that you don't have to follow those rules and encumbrances. And it also doesn't mean that the HOA can't take action against you if you decide to voluntarily not pay them any money,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big misperception that a lot of people have. They say, oh, well, the HOA doesn't matter, it's voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
That still means that you have to follow the rules and covenants of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Just means that it's voluntary whether you decide to pay for it or not.
Great explanation and the importance of all caps here, like Pete said, because this is so important to the part of the contract. So let's go to other stuff here. Do you want to cover anything else? The minutes, declaration, article of incorporation, bylaws. You kind of covered that already.
Yeah, and one thing here is this goes back to us not being attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
These contracts, these rules and regs, they were drafted by lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our job to interpret legal documents outside of the contract
Mm-hmm.
to buy and sell, or contracts that are approved by DORA for
Mm-hmm.
us to interpret.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's some language that your clients need interpreting of, if there's some specific rules and bylaws that your clients have very special needs to, this may be a time where you should actually refer something out to an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I do is you can look at the sections, and
Mm-hmm.
if your client wants a 56 plus community
Mm-hmm.
and there's no section excluding that, then you should bring that to their attention. But by no means should you try to interpret 98 pages of bylaws.
No, that's impossible for us to do. Yes.
So again, refer those out to an attorney. Now, if it's black and white, and I know that they have a pet that they love very dearly, and I see that section 26 in the bylaws say no pets in capital letters, I think it's also important for us to point out to our buyers that they should probably read section 26.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yes.
shouldn't be interpreting the section word for word.
No, no, that's not our job. All right, so this is conditional on buyer's review, all these HOA docs. And also, one thing to point out is who needs these financials from the HOA? Who else needs it? Buyer should know it, but somebody really critical in the transaction here.
Yes, good point to bring up here, and I'm glad you did because I was actually kind of mowing that one over. So one of the most important things with an HOA is that your lender needs to qualify the HOA just as much as your borrower needs to qualify to purchase that home. and they do it through the HOA financials. So any loan, FHA or VA, the condo complex actually has to be approved by HUD for you to get financing there, meaning that the HOA has to have a certain amount of money in reserves, a certain amount of homeowner occupants have to live there, a certain amount of delinquencies can't be present, and a lot of that needs to be communicated between you and your lender and the complex that you're riding on. There's also condo questionnaires for conventional financing that aren't as scrutinous as they are for VA or FHA. And there's also private money financiers who can finance around bad condo questionnaires. However, if an HOA is in default, you should seriously consider whether or not it's worth purchasing there, because it, again, will encumber the property, and you do have to pay the dues. Even if the HOA does go into default and your dues go up to $800 a month, you still have to pay that to get the HOA out of that type of default.
Wow.
Why the lenders are looking at the HOA financials to make sure that they're qualified.
Right. Even if it's single family homes, if you have an HOA and they're very weak financially, that could pose trouble for your clients in the future.
Absolutely. John, I think that's a good stopping point.